60% of Canadians feel that too many immigrants are coming to Canada. So a majority of Canadians feel that way.
Is this change an admission by the federal government that what's been going on over the past few years hasn't worked? That you've...
Mark Miller, Canada's Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. He has been making waves with his policies, but with a growing population, economic challenges, and heated political debates, is he steering Canada in the right direction? Let's break it down. Oh.
He messed it up. Said the boom was good, saved 2 recessions, but now folks can't afford possessions. Unemployment's high, rent's insane, but
Minister Miller, thank you. Are you going to take accountability for the destructive immigration policies that you have, sir?
I understand you don't like immigrants.
On July 26, 2023, Mark Miller stepped into the role of Immigration Minister, replacing Sean Fraser. His first big move? Unveiling the 2024 to 2026 Immigration Plan, which aims to welcome over 485,000 new permanent residents in 2024 and 500,000 in both 2025 and 2026.
I'm pleased to share that Canada intends to maintain its target of welcoming 485,000 new permanent residents in 2024 and 500,000 in 2025. Starting in 2026, the number of newcomers we aim to welcome will stabilize at 500,000.
Under these policies, Canada's population exploded, growing by over 2.3 million people in just 2 years, the fastest surge since the 1950s. But with this growth comes challenges: rising unemployment, skyrocketing housing costs, and affordability struggles.
We have too many people coming in and we cannot accommodate them. This has nothing to do with not liking immigrants. This has everything to do with liking Canadians.
Miller argues that rapid population growth actually saved Canada from 2 recessions. But critics have raised another question. Is the Liberal government increasing immigration to secure votes? Miller dismisses this as political hooey, but the polls suggest a shift. Immigrants who've been in Canada for over 6 years are less likely to vote Liberal in the next election. For years, the Liberal government increased immigration targets, reaching a goal of 500,000 permanent residents per year. At first, Miller stood firm, saying cutting immigration was not an option. But as economic concerns mounted, he hinted at a possible adjustment coming in November 2024. Could this mean lowering immigration targets?
It's clear that the age of unlimited supply of cheap foreign labor is over, and I think that is a good thing. But it isn't. These are not sort of binary discussions and decision points. There's some nuance within them. My challenge over the last year has been essentially to infuse some discipline into the immigration system, make sure that it is managed, make sure that it is controlled, and that has come with some really difficult decisions that you sort of alluded to in introduction, which is the reduction of temporary workers in Canada, as well as the reduction in permanent residents, which I think is important because we still need immigrants, we still need immigration, but we do have to be able to say to Canadians that we've been listening to them and react accordingly when we see that things get overheated. So I think that is sort of the shifting of a very large ship that we've been affecting over the last year. There's no shying away from the fact that there's some stuff that I think we could have gotten better.
It all started with a surprising trend in 2023. A spike in international students requesting asylum. This raised concerns about whether Canadian student visa program system was being misused.
Can you tell us how many international students do claim asylum while they're here on student visas?
There's a growing number, Mercedes, and it's frankly quite alarming.
So why the sudden shift? The answer lies in Canada's housing crisis. Rent prices in Vancouver and Toronto have skyrocketed, and many blame high immigration levels. Yet in some circles, if you express such sentiments, you are considered an ist or a phobe. With many articles coming out from many news organizations claiming as such.
It is unhealthy to link housing to the volume of people that are coming here to seek refuge and asylum.
equally unhealthy to relate it to immigrants. That the price of houses has jumped as a result of interest rates, and affordability has jumped as a result of that. That isn't because of volumes that we are seeing. At the same time, and these are two truths that can be the case at the same time, it's no surprise that people that are here temporarily, as economists measure, do put pressure on what they call the cost of shelter. This is more of a humanitarian challenge because the type of shelter that we would deploy as a responsible country to welcome these people, affordability has struck every single part of the country, and that is not something that asylum seekers have created, nor should they be held responsible for.
So the question I have is, who is responsible for the issues we are facing?
I would say universities and colleges have been going to one or two source countries and constantly going back to the well on that. We expect a diversity of students. It doesn't mean that Indian students aren't some of the best and brightest. Indeed, one of the largest populations in the world, you would expect students to come from India. But what I've asked universities and colleges to do is you need to put a little more effort into the price of acquisition to use probably an expression that isn't entirely fitting, but you have to be able to invest more in the talent that you're bringing here. And that includes going to more countries and expanding your resources. And that is a message that is ongoing as universities and colleges are asked to not only rebrand, but change their pitch to attract people from around the world from different countries. There will always be students from India, there will always be students from Pakistan. That fairness and balance isn't totally up to me, but it is one that I am watching closely because there are students that are coming from those countries that could be really important to.
So the issue is not increased immigration levels brought on by the current government. The issue is colleges and universities have been going to one source for students.
We are just now starting to get some control over the student category, which is a very large part of that, but it is also a part that generates billions and billions of dollars for provincial economies, in particular Ontario and BC. So we need to see those results stick first.
Mark then goes on to explain the reason for the rise in immigration levels is because of an aging population.
It's positive. I think we will always be a country that is built on immigration. Our gross domestic product is driven largely by that. We have to make our workforce younger, like a lot of countries in the G7 that have aging workforces.
There's some stuff that I think we could have gotten better. I think there's a lot of good that has happened as well, and I think people recognize that, whether it's the singular among our peers in making our workforce younger, which is important to a country that is aging. Net zero birth to death rate in Canada, that should focus the mind on how we pay for all the programs that are part of our national identity, whether it's free healthcare or others, and we need a young labor force to be able to generate that revenue. That's just a fact.
The Canadian press, I remember a number of months ago, reported that your predecessor received a briefing 2 years ago in which it was clearly outlined that both the temporary and permanent stream would have a salient impact on affordability. You didn't do anything. I have to challenge you on that. You didn't do anything for at least a year after that. It's like you kind of turned a blind eye. Is there a reason for that?
And of course, as per his party's motto, he eventually blamed Trump.
Is it your representation to President Trump that the border is not broken?
Well, I think what we have to understand with President Trump is, does he want a border or doesn't he want a border? If he wants,
is it broken or not? You've said Canada's not broken.
If he wants a 51st state, he obviously doesn't want a border. We need to secure in our own national interest the border. That's what I've been doing as the immigration minister in the 2 years that I've been doing it. I think we've shown an incredible decline of people moving north-south. We have a challenge of people coming into Canada, asylum seekers coming into Canada, and that's the U.S. That's the U.S.'s job, and that's what I communicated to Tom Homan when I spoke to him directly. Having a border that is well managed, our southern border, their northern border, is in both our national interests, and that's what I'll continue to do. That's what the Minister of Public Safety will.
Once the blame game was over, it was time to address the issue. Mark then goes on to tell us that the reason for these changes is the cost of shelter.
Is driving the need for this change?
Well, certainly the cost of shelter, and that in this case is often the rental market.
Mark eventually tells us he can do nothing about the situation.
So the Bank of Canada a few weeks ago suggested that the government will not meet its targets for pulling back on immigration and slowing population growth. Are you seeing signs that the government is having difficulty meeting its objectives?
So so how are you going to track then those whose work permits are expiring by the end of 2025? Again, it's in the hundreds of thousands. You're not giving me much confidence or Canadians confidence that you have a plan, because we have a breakdown by month how many student visas and work visas are expiring, and you haven't provided any information on the means. How are you going to do it? You say you have partner organizations, you're working with people. What are you actually doing? What's the process? How are you going to ensure people abide by the visa conditions?
As I said to you before, just like the vast majority of people that come to the country on a temporary basis, the vast majority leave. In some cases, increasingly many, I will concede, people decide to choose. They are in a situation of irregularity in that case. Once they have exhausted their remedies, they are removed by CBSA.
Well, that's interesting, because you've made public statements repeatedly claiming and saying and alleging, based on IRCC data, that is not what's going on. And that's why the IRB now has a record number of backlogged applications for asylum. And you have said that tens of thousands of them are actually international students who are staying longer to applying for asylum. And you're claiming they don't have a legitimate claim to make. That those are your quotes, the headlines you're generating by doing communications out there. So are you saying you don't have a plan, that this is part of your plan to have an increasing backlog at the IRB to deal with it?
Mark then said other provinces have to do more to take in asylum seekers.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith last night sounding off against federal discussions aimed at resettling asylum seekers across the country in an effort to ease the burden on Ontario and Quebec. Smith argues her province doesn't have the capacity to meet federal resettlement numbers, an argument also being made by her counterparts in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Saskatchewan.
Yeah, and it's not only just to the international student program, putting a cap on it and sort of rationalizing it, making it fair across the provinces, with Ontario and BC having done taken more than their lion's share of international students. We've tried to make.
And I can definitely understand how this would be infuriating to some of my fellow Canadians.
Canadians have pretty good bullshit detectors, and they know when they're being bullshitted.
And as one could expect, crime levels are on the rise.
Number of gangland people, number of people with organized crime links from Punjab have been made welcome in Canada. We have been telling Canada, saying, look, these are wanted criminals from India. You have given them visas. They have come, many of them, in false documentation. And yet you allow them to live there. If you decide to import for political purposes people with very dubious, actually very negative background, there will be issues.
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਭਾਈ ਇਹੀ ਕਾਸ਼ ਭਾਈ ਦੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਆ ਜੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਮੌਂਟਰੀ ਤੋਂ ਨਿਊਯਾਰਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਸੇਫ ਪਹੁੰਚੇ ਆ ਬਹੁਤ ਵਧੀਆ ਗੇਮ ਆ ਕਾਸ਼ ਭਾਜੀ ਦੀ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਮੌਂਟਰੀ ਤੋਂ ਨਿਊਯਾਰਕ ਆਉਣਾ ਹੈ.
Now, some of you may find such critiques racist.
But I did want to touch on all of that. And I wanted to mention one thing here. There's some horrible, as expected, reporting that goes on around Baji's death. But one of them was around this idea of how he arrived in Canada. This refugee status and these false refugee claims, and he was, and we sent in responses to some of those media outlets and things like that, just questioning the whiteness of these conversations. That you came here hundreds of years ago, raping, pillaging, and plundering this land, and you're going to talk to us as we seek our sovereignty and limit this guy's entire life to a refugee claim you think went bad.
With the issue addressed, as to say, to simply do nothing, Mark was free to continue his political foibles.
But I brought you guys, I brought Pierre some donuts today, just like he was bringing to the Freedom Convoy when he was watching them illegally occupy the hill. But I didn't know if you guys will get locked out, so I got some. You probably can't accept donuts, so I'll give it. It's highly unpatriotic.
Just bailout. Just media bailout.
Look, I just showed up to make sure that the flags were the right side up. Last time I seen Pierre cheering this hard, the flags were all upside down. And he was cheering for people that were pissing on Canada, and that's what Pierre's doing. You can't say that Canada is broken, and at the same time say that Canada is the best country in the world.
Is our immigration system not broken?
The two just don't.
Is the border not
go
broken?
Together.
With all the information presented, do you think Mark should have lost his job? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. See ya.
Slide my soul down. Come here to trombone.